Very nice.
And I'm deep into that Haydn sonata.
I want to go ahead.
I want to.
And sorry to interrupt. We're having a great chit chat here, but I want to go ahead and start our TL talk. Friday, we're closing up another busy week for some, complicated week for others, but definitely back for one of my favorite moments of this whole situation we're living, which is these TL talks that were born during the pandemic, and I think are going to continue to live on past it. I wanted to firstly thank everybody that's listening to us. I think we are getting a growing audience. Some people like to watch us on a Saturday, on a Sunday, over lunch during the week. So thank you so much for tuning in. We've had tremendous success without any big objective as we started these TL Talks in April, trying to just send out some positive energy to the industry. The idea was never to predict anything. We're not trying to be, to have all the answers, but our goal was always to be able to join a few friends, a few of the leaders in the industry, bring some wisdom, and try to inspire and motivate the industry to just think a little differently, to feel optimistic considering the challenges ahead of us, and make the best of what we have. And we have an amazing panel once again this week, which I'm thrilled. For those that do not know me, my name is Tina Lira. I am the founder of TL Portfolio. We are a sales and marketing representation and a PR communication business with offices in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, New York, and Los Angeles. We are a team of 17 women who I adore and who remain with me throughout the pandemic. And it's a pleasure to be here with you connected. So if you're a travel advisor, a hotel owner, a restaurant owner in media, thank you so much for joining us. We have a very special panel with experts in hospitality, communication, and architecture. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel, starting with the lovely Michaela Guzy. Fuzzy Guzy. I always have to remember Fuzzy Guzy.
Guzy rhymes with fuzzy.
Yes. Because I would say Michaela, but it's Michaela. So
I like how you say that. You say it that way. It sounds sexy and exotic.
So thank you so much for joining. For those that don't know Michaela, she is the founder and chief content creator for All the People You Meet. Michaela is an American media executive, entrepreneur, speaker, and on-air host. She is also the executive producer of 2 original award-winning series, Michaela's Map and All the People You Meet. Based in New York, she's also the adjunct professor at NYU, NYU School of Professional Studies, where she teaches a course called Travel Storytelling, Creating Video Content. And in response to COVID-19, Michaela created a daily live show on Instagram called Inspiration Station, which has already gone viral. She just closed up her 75th episode with over 2 million views. Congratulations. Very cool. And prior to her incredible career in media, in her own business, she was also the Vice President of Global Travel and Strategic Development for American Express Publishing. So thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm thrilled to introduce Chris Norton. He is CEO of Equinox Hotel, somebody that I have followed throughout my career. He's been designing premier guest experiences with holistic health in mind over a long career of over 30 years. He's launched the first ever Equinox Hotel, which is a luxury lifestyle and hospitality brand. Chris was raised in Zurich, and he got his first taste of hospitality from a friend's family-run hotel and restaurant based in the outskirts of a picturesque city in Switzerland. His career includes infamous properties such as Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., Boca Raton Resort and Club in Florida, and the Ritz-Carlton in New York. He had a very long tenure with Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, where he was most recently president and chief operating officer, overseeing all global hotel operations. When Chris is not in the helm of Equinox, he is often found out riding his motorcycle, playing piano, spending time with his wife and kids, or relaxing as he is right now in the south of France. I forgot to mention you study in a little school called École Estudier Lausanne. I forget, I studied at La Roche, and that name really doesn't stick to me sometimes. It just totally forget about that school, but has an amazing career. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
A legend in the world of design and architecture, David Rockwell, founder and president of Rockwell Group. David founded the group in 1984. It is an office that contains 250 people, award-winning cross-discipline architecture and design practice in New York with satellite office in Madrid. He trained at Syracuse University and the Architectural Association in London. He has a strong passion, and I think which has also been a lot of the driving force behind his work for theater. And he has a strong influence, as I do, with Mexico, as at the age of 12, he moved to Guadalajara from New Jersey. I also grew up in Mexico City. Viva México, lindo y querido. Totally connect with you there. So David is the recipient of numerous awards, including the 2016 Tony Award for Best Scenic Design for the musical She Loves Me, and 6 Tony Awards nomination for Best Scenic Design. Today, his work ranges from restaurants to hotels to museum exhibitions and Broadway sets. David, it is a pleasure to have you here. I think we're going to have a fantastic conversation with a very broad range of experience. So thank you so much for joining us. And
Thanks for having me.
Chris, for connecting me to David. I appreciate that. I wanted to start off the panel with a very light question, and it's just to get everybody a little feeling to, where everybody's coming from, even on a professional note. So I think, as I've been doing this every week, there is a feeling that there's been almost like a second wave, not of Corona, but a second wave of an emotional roller coaster, as people had expected it to be over by now. Maybe hotels are opening and there's an expectation of a slight little boom. Some travel advisors are kind of feeling a FOMO of not feeling that boom that they expected, because it's not really there as one would have hoped. And I was wondering if you could share with us, how have you dealt with this in your personal lives, and what kind of silver lining have you seen? And it's just a little brief introduction to your reality. And Michaela, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, one, I'd say I don't think anyone expected it to go on this long. I agree with you there. And also in the US, our PUA, which is the federal funding that some people have been enjoying, whether you're self-employed or unemployed or furloughed and whatnot, that ended just last week. So I think those are massive contributing factors. So even if you are financially secure, you're probably a little bit nervous. I created Inspiration Station as a way to just help connect people and inspire people, because we had the opportunity only to communicate in our social isolation digitally. And so that was really the impetus behind starting that show 19 weeks ago. And it, like yours, is continuing to expand and live on, and we're learning from all of our mistakes. I am seeing people starting to travel, and I myself am out in the Hamptons, which was just a drive from New York City. But I am going on family vacation, and it'll be my second trip that I take on a airplane on Tuesday. And so I'm excited to go and to connect with my family and friends. And so I think the first travel people are going to see are that reconnection with family, friends, celebrations that maybe didn't happen or have been postponed. And I think people will start getting out there in as safe a way possible and wearing masks. Lots of masks and hand sanitizer.
For sure. No, and it's nice to see you getting out there. There's a big movement within the travel industry to jumpstart travel, and their hashtags everybody's posting. And if you're able and willing to do it, I think it's great. If you're not finding
Turkey's
right
open
time,
to Americans. Tahiti's open. You can go to Los Cabos. So there are places that are open.
There are places, but it's also for those that don't feel it's time yet. They have family members that, are more sensitive to the situation. I think everybody's going to find their time, and that's okay as well. Chris, tell us a little bit about your reality, as I know you just arrived in your house in the south of France, but all in all, how has the this quarantine been?
And how have your neighbors been, Chris?
Yeah, let me talk about the neighbors first. But I think you asked two pieces, and one of them is kind of the shock piece, and one of them is the silver lining. I'll start with maybe the shock. It came so quickly to all of us, and it kind of hit like most of these crises do. But I think the most difficult piece we're all still struggling with is that nobody really has an answer. And and nobody really can forecast when it's going to end, what it's going to look like, if it's a second wave or not. So I think one of the most difficult things to deal with in life in general is the unknown, because if you would have a problem that you know exactly how to fix, even if it were difficult to fix, it's kind of easier to get your arms around. And so we have been kind of just going through this continuous watching the evolution of the pandemic and the crisis, and how it has affected people, and how it has affected the economy, and it's been awful. It's been really difficult. I think the silver lining is, and I'm probably not telling you anything that none of us have heard or read or talked about, is the slowing down of time. And I always am fascinated by time, as kind of an element that affects life, because it's so fluid and flexible. And the slowing down of time has allowed us in so many ways to get back in touch with basics. And we're very privileged. My neighbor and I, David, we live in the same place in Chelsea. And we have for 2 years maybe, David. But David and I would never before go and play the piano together. We're both hobby, amateur pianists, and I'm always inspired by David's discipline and hard work. But there's a human connection I'm sure a lot of us can talk about and have found, connecting with the family in a different way, and then coming here and coming home after confinement in New York for 3 months. We came here to look after some family business and see our children that live in Europe. And here also, we live in a town in Provence. There's usually a lot of tourists in July, August. There's probably 35% less tourists, which are all foreigners. So all you see is French people. And you can, you go to the countryside and you wear your mask. But it's kind of this rediscovering some of the very beautiful, simple things in life that we might have skipped before because we were so busy. And to me, that's the silver lining. And I hope we can take a piece of that and keep it as we come back.
So true. We had Jerry Azzarillo, who I'm sure you know, in some of the past talks, and he said the new luxury right now is time, and it is appreciating it more than ever and try to hold on to it when life comes back. So I think that's very much what you were saying. David, how is quarantine for an architect?
Well, March 13th was the day restaurants went to 50% capacity. I went to a New York City restaurant. And March 14th, all restaurants were closed. Shortly thereafter, all theaters were closed. And I spoke to my entire office, and I opened up the talk by saying, the good news is, guys, we don't depend on creating places for people to come together for a living. And there was this total silence. And I said, I'm kidding. That's exactly what we do. That is what we do. But I'll tell you what's been really a revelation for me. And that is, I've always been interested in how theater and architecture are similar. And one of the ways they're so similar is when you go to the theater, if there's not an audience and there's not a performance, it's an inert art form. It doesn't exist. And I think looking out at New York City as it shut down during the pandemic, it reinforced that cities aren't defined by hardware or concrete and steel buildings. They're defined by the sort of life and the people that are within the buildings. And it's been really painful and difficult to see the city stripped of, I think, the reason we all love cities, which is to run into people you don't know. It's to congregate. But as Chris said, it has in some ways forced people to slow down a little bit. I think it has ironically reinforced the importance of public space. And I think that will be one of the things coming out of this as it starts to happen. Privileging public space, outdoor space, will be an outcome. And it's led to me really kind of studying ways as an architect to think about short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And we're in the short term right now. How do we make the streets appealing? How do we get restaurants back into business? How can hotels start to cobble together a plan? So that's how it's kind of affected me. I feel like the time that I've had in some ways has narrowed my focus on a few projects. Chris mentioned taking sort of privileged time back into our world post-pandemic. I also think the ability to know which projects work best on a Zoom call and which projects works best in person is a new muscle. I don't know anyone who had that muscle before this, but in no way. Yesterday, I had a review with 2 or 3 designers in person because texture and materials just don't work on Zoom. It's almost an impossibility. So I think it's a time where we're learning the importance of why we need to be together. And I think there'll be a whole groundswell of new changes, behavioral changes about how we allow that to happen.
I know it's very interesting, and I'm going to try to address that and try to pick your brain on that creativity element there. We had Jackie Gifford from Travel and Leisure join us in the past, and she was feeling the need to try to invent how theater and art will be appreciated if it can't be in a closed space. And I know that you were passionate about that as well. And as I think you mentioned in a past interview, concerts can be enjoyed, digitally, but theater somehow can't. So we have to find a way to bring it outdoors. And I'm sure your brain is already ticking with a lot of, new ways for that to happen. And I'm going to start off.
I can jump in.
Yes,
I could just add, because I think what David said some really, really, really good things, which I'll remember. We have this theater in our house, which is like a private theater with a huge screen and an amazing sound system. I don't know, David, if you had a chance to go down, and we watched Hamilton when it came out a few weeks ago. And Brigitte had seen it. My wife had seen it on Broadway. I had not actually, and I went in kind of, wondering how it was going to be. The piece that was spectacular was the digital testosterone that it kind of shot in, because the sound quality and the comfort, all that was perfect. What wasn't part of it is, what is so exciting about theater is what you described as it's kind of this foreplay before you go in, and meeting and seeing and rushing and the noise you hear, and then the tuning of the orchestra and all these tactile pieces that become part of an experience that we're missing. And so it was really interesting to kind of see, and it had a good piece to it, and it had that void to it that was obvious.
Very, very true. And it's funny, I can't help, and Jackie mentioned it on the previous talk, but I can't have, I try to keep imagining, if the streets in a future where people don't have to be there's not such a big need to live in the city and be on top of each other to work, because suddenly digital is more possible. Could we have these beautiful theaters in the middle of the streets and have whole, streets closed and everything coming to life other than cars occupying all these avenues? What you're doing with restaurants.
There's no question that the door has been opened now to how we use the streets, and it's Central Park was an outgrowth about thinking about public health and where people could be to get fresh air. I think there's the greatest growth in Broadway theaters. The majority were done after the Spanish flu. So I think we don't know how things are going to reform, but it is in some kind of transition.
Well, but I was just going to add as well, when they first started reopening restaurants, Tampa was one of the test runs for the streets. And that made perfect sense because it was much warmer there. New York, if there was a second coming of COVID, oh my God, like I was there the entire time until just last week. And watching the city reopen was, as a New Yorker that moved there right before 9/11, it was like very touching to watch everything start to come back to life. But in March and April, the weather was awful. May finally started coming about. But like, what happens if there is a second coming of COVID in the fall or winter? Like, how does the outside work? I don't know about you. I don't want to sit in the snow or the rain.
David will
and eat
fix it.
dinner.
Don't
You'll
worry.
love it.
Don't worry. He'll totally
Please.
fix it. It'll be amazing. It'll be amazing. He's already planning for it. Don't worry, Michaela. We're all good. We got the man.
We'll all go to the shed and hang out at the David's shed.
Excellent.
Yes. And listen to you both play piano. I'm kind of
Heat
looking
lamp.
forward to that. Can't help but thinking that's pretty nice.
What's amazing about the piano thing is how differently we approach. It's an amazing exchange, and it probably would not have happened if it weren't for us being in our home so much. But it's really like a very special cultural exchange, very different approaches.
Maybe that should work on Zoom. I'm thinking. I'm sure we could do
We could do a side by side, like together. But we also, there's a competitive. Both David and I are very competitive individuals, and so
Dueling
there's always
pianos. I love it.
Well, no, there's a humorous piece to it because we're very proud of our instruments, and so we always compare the instruments and then which is the better tune. And the last time I was at David's place, he was very proud, touched it, and he said, "Make sure you use the pedal." And I said, "It has been tuned. It has." Yes, it has been. So, yeah. But there's a tactile joy to some of those experiences. I mean, you can't play an instrument like that. The vibration misses in the digital world, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how to better say that, but we're tactile, animals to some extent. We love a digital world, and I'm sure there's going to be a post-COVID. I mean, it's not, and I'm sure people will go back to cities because the lifestyle in the city is just very different from, as beautiful as it is, living in the suburbs or the countryside. So, maybe this is a midterm and long-term thing, but I think we'll get back to it and just take some of these learnings forward.
Yeah, I think there's beauty in choice, really.
Michaela. Buy snowshoes.
Okay. I'm sure they're in my storage unit somewhere.
I'm going to start then with a question, and David, maybe I'll start with you. I was doing my little research here, and or along with my team. And in 2014, you created a 1,300 seat temporary theater for TED conference in Vancouver, which was designed to be built in just 5 days, used for a week, and then dismantled and stored, ready to be used again the following year. I think you mentioned that was kind of a breakthrough, and because it straddles your interest and passion for things that are temporary, like theater, and things that are permanent, like buildings. And I think it was very interesting because you utilized that passion when you came across, and I'd love for you to talk about, I think you hit a moment that you talked about briefly just now of crisis, or frustration or whatever, as everybody did when the pandemic hit. And yet you were able to get something that you have as your passion, your toolkit, and help people, right? And really create a little stand-up, pop-up helping situation. I'd love for you to talk about it. And if you could even take it further, how could that idea or even the project you have be utilized or implemented globally, or help people use that skill set to think about something or create something?
Well, the long interest really started in Mexico, which was such a city of festivals and such a city of kind of intense celebration. And I think I took that into architecture school and beyond. And I've always felt like permanence is a great sort of imaginary outcome, but buildings are never really permanent. And I think the strive for permanence in architecture sometimes masks the pleasure of temporal. And nothing's a better lesson for temporal than theater. It only exists for the time you're there. So I've always had this interest in celebrating a moment and places that help celebrate a moment. So the TED conference was originally a 600 seat place in Monterey. It had grown to 2,000 seats. It had lost its intimacy when they moved to Vancouver. I thought about a campfire and created a demountable structure, because the third quality that I think is really, really critical is specificity. I mean, there's no theater that exists for a 1,300 seat single person talk. because it wouldn't work for anything else. So it had to be its own thing. When restaurants closed, like many people, I got a lot of phone calls asking about the future of restaurants. And I couldn't really answer that and still can't, but I certainly didn't want to talk about it till I had started to do a lot of research. So I spoke to restaurateurs around the country, and we started to think about what would signal kind of it's emotionally safe to go to a restaurant. Well, that probably wasn't going to be inside. It probably was going to be on the outside. And there's great examples globally of outdoor dining. And so the challenge we gave ourselves, and we invited Melba Wilson from Melba's in Harlem, who had been on the front line of feeding healthcare workers and had really kind of been one of the leaders of pivoting from the restaurants not open, I'm going to use it to create other opportunities. And we created a non-for-profit called Dine Out and developed a really simple modular system. In the theater analogy, it's like the black box. The content, the emotion comes from the people and the food. Very simple modular system. We raised money and we developed a big deck of images to lobby the city to expedite outdoor dining being approved. So looking at every possible scenario, including the parking lane, which is now the primary way restaurants are able to open up with enough scale to make a difference. Yeah. And that's critical because, 6 chairs outside the restaurant may look very picturesque, but it's not going to justify reopening the kitchen. So part of it was creating something that was simple, inexpensive, fast, and of the scale that would help the restaurateurs. So we opened up 6 of these, 1 in each borough, with the idea that we would grow this non-for-profit, and then Resi and American Express and Moet Hennessy came on board. And Wednesday, we opened up an entire block in Chinatown on Mott Street. That's 120 seats that serves 9 restaurants. So it's the first time. Yeah, I was there last night. It's so incredibly moving to see the pride these restaurants that would not get this together on their own, but together as a community, it takes on a kind of street life.
It's fantastic. And I think one of the questions is, I have a good friend, her name is Alexandra Forbes, and she's very influential in Brazil or actually worldly in the food and beverage scene. She's very connected with all the chefs, and she's trying to do this in Brazil. And without this black box of yours, it's complicated. She's coming out in the social media and saying, guys, I need donations of, we got tables, we don't have chairs, and we need this. And when I saw your project, I thought, oh, that's the answer, So how can we make that? And I would love later on to get the details so I could share and make this connection. But I think the solution you found is needed globally, right? It's the first time that everything is needed everywhere the same.
And of course, the question of what do we do in late October is a question we're thinking and everyone else is thinking. And it's going to be an evolving solution. There's so many unknowns about but we are putting pieces in the outdoor dining that can pivot to indoor dining. So I think you want to start to think about how it's not just single use. And that's the other thing going forward, given how fragile the restaurant industry really is and how this has exposed tiny little profit margins, lots of underpaid workers in cramped health conditions, that the idea of something day parting, the parking lane being used for dining, the restaurant being used for a grocery store, maybe the kitchen is being used for cooking classes. I think day parting multiple use is going to be very much a part of the story of how cities are used.
No, it's exciting to think, and I think it'll change things forever, and hopefully for the best. And thinking about change, Chris, I want to ask you with regards to an interview you did for CPP Luxury pre-opening of Equinox. You were describing how health becomes the new wealth, and that Equinox is uniquely positioned to define the emerging category that is disrupting the entire industry, right? You were talking about how this new lifestyle and wellness movement was going to become the new luxury. And I'd love, that was prior to opening the hotel. You've opened the hotel, the world turned upside down. How do you see this progression? Like from that prediction to opening to tomorrow, how does that evolve?
Well, I'll answer that in kind of slices, if I may. My first slice kind of hitches my answer onto what David said, and you listen to David speak and think, you kind of understand why when we developed this new positioning of what a luxury hotel would look like, or a luxury experience in hospitality would look like, why we ended up, which wasn't the original plan, but why we ended up with David, because David helped us think through design beyond the color of the cushions, but design and luxury really being more around content and and building a platform that allows you, if you have chosen wellness, and it's such a broad term, as a lifestyle, that becomes your priority luxury. And so David and his thinking, and if you listen to David speak, the way he thinks through some of these issues really helped us design an experience beyond the color of the cushion, and really design things that are in the walls and behind the chairs, and things you don't see, but the air filtration systems in hotel rooms, for example, which you would really not think about, but if you start reading statistic about, and I'm talking about wellness now, people that live in cities and the polluted air they breathe, not only outside but inside, and that the purification of air and the quality of air becomes such an important piece of, quote, a luxury experience. And that is one of many pieces that bring this together. So I think that we put years of thinking into this repositioning of luxury, and you could argue that we probably are even better positioned today, because the consciousness around something like COVID has just accelerated people's desire to consume luxury around wellness. And when I say that, I want to quickly define wellness, because it's such a broad term. And I'm going to use something that a good friend of mine used when she described it to me. And the idea is that wellness is something that you do to yourself, versus healthcare is something that a nurse or a doctor does. And so there is this concept in wellness that is preventative, something that you consciously do, and it includes pieces of movement and exercise, but it also includes food, and also includes regen, so how you sleep, and then it includes not only the physical but the emotional and the mental well-being, and it all kind of comes together in that piece. And so I think the consciousness around building experiences that deliver sometimes invisible content that make a difference in the quality of, quote, your wellness, I think superbly important. And if I look back, I think that we kind of were able to do a lot of these things that, again, in today's world probably will benefit from that thinking. And then David was a huge piece of that.
I have to compliment you guys, because I have spent my entire life dedicated to hospitality. And I've stayed at many hotels. I was traveling 15 days a month. And so, but honestly, though I didn't stay there, I visited your property, Chris, with a group of Traveler Made and Quentin, who's the owner of Traveler Made and a good friend. And for the first time, I felt like I was in the future. And I told you this when we spoke, the thought and the technology used and the brain power behind the importance of sleep. And for, it's hard to say this, but it wasn't just marketing, it wasn't about the thread count. It was about the temperature, the sound, the air, that it was like, wow, like this is for real. This is unbelievable. So it truly is, when you took a concept, and as you said, there was years and obviously tremendous brain power there, but really implementing it to the core and doing it, genuinely, to say this is not just the story, this is the real thing. So sorry I interrupted you, David, but I have to mention it was so impressive.
Thank you. It's very, very kind of you, and we got great press, and we're quite happy with that. The only thing that I would like to add, and it's something that I think we need to elevate our consciousness around, is that so often wellness is put in the context of privilege, and there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of discussion around this. What is it, a $4 trillion industry now? And there's the sense that, it's kind of the new chic thing to do. It shouldn't be. I think wellness, in some cultures maybe don't have it, but wellness really is something that should transcend through all social income scenarios, and it's something that all of us should be aware of and thoughtful. And wellness doesn't always have to cost a lot. Doesn't have to cost a lot of money. I think wellness is very often an attitude and a question of priorities and choice and how you want to live your life. And hence, this health is the new wealth. If you have a lot of money and you're not healthy, you're not going to enjoy it. So, and I think if I talk to my kids, they're in their 30s now, and and they're they're spectacular people, but the values around time and well-being and that, I think that generation is certainly ahead of where we were and where our parents were.
I mean, one element of wellness, I think you can associate that's built into Equinox.
Beliefs, and that can make it have a point and keep on.
Music. Sorry, go ahead. I don't know where that came from.
Wow, voices from the great beyond.
Yeah.
One element that would apply to any, Equinox is a luxury product. The strategy that there's very little stuff in the room gives it a kind of wellness that applies to any part of the market segment. And I think hotels have tended to add more and more stuff that I think becomes a distraction. So one of the things in Equinox was a matter of actually subtraction. There's one piece of furniture, which is not a continuous upholstered line, and the resources go into other things: acoustical sound isolation, really thoughtful places to hang your clothes, and not a lot of unnecessary stuff.
Yeah.
Clutter.
I think. Yeah. No.
I was gonna. Oh, Tina, I was going to jump in. In 2014, I actually worked with the Beverly Hills Tourism Board, who was using the motto, "Health is the new wealth." And I thought they did a really great job. They brought in Matthew Kinney, who is a vegan chef, plant-based. And so he was teaching all of us about the eating well, right? And they partnered with Alo Yoga, who were doing classes and packages. And then every hotel in Beverly Hills, Montage, Peninsula, came up with these special wellness packages, but it was beyond just the spa treatment. It was that there was a special pillow or sleeping menu for you when you checked in. There was the spa treatment. You could go to Alo Yoga and do the class. You could go have a plant-based whatever from Chef Matthew Kinney. And they had the green juices and all the things, but there was the education tool around it. And what I think Chris is talking about with consciousness and having that around it, it's not just exercising to stay thin. It's actually incorporating things that you might learn on a wellness retreat back into your everyday life, and recognizing that your mind, body, and soul are connected. And this dates back thousands of years to Ayurveda. And it's so exciting to see things like Ayurveda making a comeback into spa treatments at fabulous luxury hotels, but also like turmeric lattes. Like, these are all elements of Ayurveda coming into our everyday life and to really working on balance. And some things that can be done and free, and resources we cover very frequently. A lot of yoga studios, Six Senses, for example, started offering free classes with their trainers, teaching you to meditate, like breaking down some of these things that seemed spiritual woo-woo. I feel like people are a little bit more open to experimenting now, especially if they can do it anonymously and free and online. And hopefully, silver lining, people will all be a little bit more balanced, grounded, and slower as we emerge out of COVID-19.
Very much. David, you wanted to add something to that? I don't know if I interrupted you.
No, not in particular. You had opened up by saying, and I forget who you quoted, that time is a new luxury. Who was the person?
Jerry Inzerillo.
Jerry Inzerillo. I love Jerry.
Yeah, he's cool.
The time being the new luxury. I remember 1994, I think, when Nobu first opened up. That was an eye-opener for me to be a part of a 3-star, I think the first 3-star restaurant with no tablecloths. So that was a case where instead of a 3-hour meal where everything comes in a dome and gets its own presentation, luxury was having that hour-and-a-half dinner and then getting the extra 2 hours back to do whatever you wanted to do. But it seems like there's a shift that's continuing in how we use our time.
I think it ties into the fact that time, I mean, it's the rarest commodity all of us have. If you think of it, it always has been. And go back and if I think about one of the great people I admire in this industry is Izzy Sharp. He always 40 years ago he said, it's the rare commodity we have, and make sure that as we do all this stuff, we never forget that a guest's time is of most value. And as more money you have, as quicker time goes, and more things you do, and less time you have. And we all have been there and kind of experienced, you're busy and successful in that, and then you forget that you really enjoy it. So I think COVID has helped us kind of realize that a bit again. And the question is, how do we take it forward?
COVID is also going to be giving us all a lesson in resilience. Places are going to be built with more flexibility and more resilience, and I think that's going to be a place, certainly for designers, to have a real seat at the table to think about how to build places that are flexible enough that they can pivot and be resilient.
Yeah, I think it applies to everybody.
If I can jump in on something else that we discussed that also kind of ties into all of that. So David talked about the room design. It wasn't about gilding the lily. It was about content. And I remember I didn't want to put. It sounds very simple. I didn't want to put throw pillows, these throw blankets on our bed. And our beds are pure white. They're great, but there's nothing decorative on the bed. Nothing. And the one reason was that we wanted people to be able to get into the bed easily at any time of the day, morning, jet lag coming in from the West Coast and all that. But the other thing, and I've kind of struggled with this for years in hotels, we all travel, we all have carry-on luggage, and we roly-poly it through the airplane. We get off the plane. Usually the first thing is we go to the airport restrooms, and there's the roly-poly bag next to us on the bathroom floor. And then it goes into the car, and then it goes into your guest room, and it goes onto the floor, which the night before, pillow, and and then it all kind of mixed together. And so I think this other learning out of the last few months is cleanliness and sanitation, and how important that is. I mean, I don't think the New York subways have ever been so clean. And other countries are cleaner and there's more sanitation. And I think this new realization of making sure that there's a reasonable degree of sanitation and cleanliness and respect towards others in what we do and how we run our businesses, I think, is very important.
Very, very, very much so. And I wanted to bring back this topic that we're talking about, and that Michaela kind of touched upon, and I know that she's very passionate about, which is the difference of wellness and well-being. Very often people interchange those in the same sentence as if they had the same meaning, and yet they're quite different. And I know you're passionate about this topic, Michaela, and I wanted you to just dive into this a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I think as you express the words like experiential and luxury, those have been buzzwords that have just been so overplayed. I don't think that either luxury or experiential is out. It's just overused, and kind of the same with wellness. Wellness travel, I think the predictions before COVID were that it was going to reach a $1 trillion market by 2022. I actually think, and I think until you've been with someone who's had a severe illness, or you yourself have had one, health is literally all you have. And so if someone you love or you yourself have had a health scare, that will suddenly snap all kinds of things into perspective. So the things that we're all fussing about, you're like, okay, whoa, I need to reevaluate. So I think well-being is what Chris was touching on before is that, you know, it is all connected. And I had one of the founders of the Shaw Wellness Clinic from Spain on my show a little while ago. And he was talking about the preventative, again, like understanding what you're putting in your body is that, and everybody's different, the level of customization to actually do it right. I'll never forget, I've been gluten and dairy free by choice since 2001. And so my mom one day was like, look, I'm eating gluten-free popcorn. And I was like, oh, bless you. They slap gluten-free on it, but popcorn's always been gluten-free. And I was like, grr, that like made me so mad because she thought she was doing something good, but she drank someone's marketing Kool-Aid. So there's a level of education that needs to happen. But the real difference between wellness and well-being is wellness is health. And again, I think that's the lining up of mind, body, soul. And then well-being is really your ability to be happy. And so happiness comes in many forms, but you need to have your wellness and your health in order to live a well life. And I do think COVID, for me, one of the many silver linings that has come is that I've had more time to sit back and be like, what's been working? What's not? Let me connect with people in a new and different way. Let me connect with new people outside of my traditional industries to understand what's happening. And for me, one of my inspirations behind my IGTV show, Inspiration Station, was that I watched my yoga studio, Moto Yoga, do a digital pivot and very quickly. And they quickly started offering free classes on Instagram. And when I asked them, like, how are you going to make money? And they're like, we don't know yet, but we know that everybody needs this right now. And so it's our gift. And I was like, wow, that's beautiful. And in a matter of 2 weeks, I saw their audience double in size. And I was like, well, what's my gift that I can give back? And I was like, well, I'm a storyteller and I'm like the ultimate connector. And so I was like, well, why don't I host a show? I already know how to do the digital stuff with inspiring people doing inspiring things. It's kind of my MO. And that was like how the show was born. And I try to incorporate different elements of wellness, meditation, yoga, eating well, but then I bring in our hotel friends as well to come and talk about innovations and pivots that are happening. And I do think inspiration and happiness lead to a well life, or life well lived.
I agree. It's about incorporating everything you learn in a wellness lifestyle property into your life in the long run. So it's not just a temporary fix, right? Because otherwise,
it's your space, it's your food, it's who you choose to spend your time with. I'm actually way more protective of my time now, of like people, purposes that deserve my time and have earned my time and give back to me, and I feel fulfilled at the end of that.
I agree. We've included a guest in our TL Talk this week. I've been trying to find ways to be able to include questions, the audience, without disturbing too much the time. And, you know, I always want to include people, and then I could stay here for hours. So I invited a very dear friend that I know that many people watching will know. He's somebody that has been my mentor and was my boss and became a very dear friend. And I speak to him on a regular basis. His name is Ricardo Acevedo. And I've included him. He's going to talk a little bit about his background. But he has a question specifically for one of you, but I would like all of you to kind of contribute into the answer. So we're going to get Ricardo to ask his question.
Hello, Tina. How are you? Regards from here from Medellin, Colombia, where I'm living now since October when I retired after 45 years career, of which 23 were with Four Seasons and the rest were with Hilton International. I am delighted to have been invited to do a question to the panel, which is very important for me, particularly that I can address to my dear amigo, former colleague and former boss, Cristobal Norton. Big hug to you, Cristobal.
That's my stage name.
And to the rest of
Hello,
the panel.
Ricardo. Good, really.
So I want to really take this opportunity to ask a question taking advantage of the wisdom of the three panelists. And I've been hired to do a consulting for a new luxury wellness resort in Cartagena, Colombia. This is projected to open in 2024 or before, it depends on the pandemic. But if I was going to ask you, Cristobal, if I was going to ask you as a mentor of mine, what would be the three main points or factors that I should take into consideration in developing this facility under the present circumstances and looking into the future of what will be the wellness industry coming forward? Again, thank you for this opportunity. Big hugs to all of you. Tina, fantastic. Tina was working with us, together with us, when we were in Singapore after the pandemic of SARS. And we were able to overcome that situation. So let's hope that we can overcome the situation in the same way. Bye-bye.
Tina, I love this guy. For those of you who don't know him, this is one of the most amazing human beings I've ever come across, because half my background is Swiss and German and Bavarian, and so because of you've always, if you're a German background, you can't be so cool because you're so earnest in most ways. And I always admired Ricardo because he has this, he looks like Othello out of an opera, and it is larger than life, and this Latino personality when he was in Singapore was, he was the star of the show. So really nice to hear your voice, and I'm glad you're doing well, my friend. So three things I would do. One, I would make sure you have a clear point of view on who you want to be and who your market is, because you can't please everyone. Number two, I would make sure that money really matters, and that you build a quality experience that is long lasting and meaningful, and is built on content that really affects people's well-being, wellness. And as an example, when I come to my house here, and you can't see it, I'm not wearing any shoes.
Me neither.
Because there's nothing more, there's you knew it. There's few things greater than walking on a 400-year-old stone. There's David's sock. There's very few things greater than walking on a 400-year-old stone, and that feeling it gives you. So when you design the detail, take off your shoes, walk on the wood that people have in their guest room, touch the stuff that people will interact with, and make sure that you really could get into that detail. And number three, hire a David Rockwell and you'll be okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Good plug-in. I don't know if Michaela or David wanted to add anything. I'm sure he's going to love the more advice and the more tips we can offer.
Well, David first.
So, it's such a broad question. The way I would think about it is, think about the three rituals and memories you want people to take away from this that last for a lifetime. How do you build around? Pick three rituals. How are you greeted? What is your hello? What does it feel like? How do you empower the person? Imagine that ritual. And I think about places that have stayed with me. Certainly the bathroom would be particular resort. I think there's so much invention that can happen in creating the most amazing, memorable ritual that maybe changes nightly, that's curated. And the third would be the dining experience, because you're in some process of either meeting people or wanting to be alone, trying new food or cutting back. You're in some process of change. So I think I would really double down all the resources into those three rituals. And if you hire me, Chris will get his finder's fee. And
I think Michaela and I have a thing to say here.
I know. Yeah, no.
It's not
kidding.
that
Let
easy,
me
boys, to get
Thank you.
around these women. Don't think that you guys are just going to make a deal and we're going to smile. It doesn't work like that. This is a new world, let me tell you.
Maybe we're all in
well-
it together. This may be the new
Yeah,
team
We're
going
there you go.
forward.
I don't. we
Well,
didn't
we'll
even
all
think that
come
way. We're-
consult. We'll come consult for you. No, well, so to build on what both of you are saying, because both of you have said wonderful things. One, Chris saying to have a distinct point of view and know who you're marketing to. Pre-COVID-19, everybody was talking about the growth of cities, and one of the big trends that came out of ILTM North America was actually from the Global Wellness Institute, and it was this ongoing urban zen, and Equinox hotels is a perfect example of that. Six Senses is opening in a big city. I do think people are freaked out from being in close proximity, but by the way, New York City is the safest place to be right now as it relates to health perspective. So like it got overwhelming to me after a few months, and I'm happy to be in nature, but I assure you I'm going to be really excited to go back to New York in a few weeks after I've had my dose of ocean. So it's interesting to me because he said Cartagena, so I'm assuming that's in a city. I think Urban Zen is going to have a huge opportunity to bring in your local market. And so these like private membership clubs, if you're unfamiliar, right now there's Soho houses, but even these shared workspaces like WeWork. I've had a WeWork office for 8 years. I'm a member of Soho House. Very excited by the private club that Six Senses is opening. I've been an Equinox gym member for forever. So I have all these memberships to different communities of people. And so I think when you're in an urban environment, you have the unique opportunity to not only bring the nature into the city and that wellness getaway, but you have an opportunity to attract local market. And hopefully David will navigate a way that we can all be inside in a restaurant and enjoying that ambiance and that vibe again, because I do think the restaurant and the dining is such a huge part of our daily life, especially when you go on holiday or a wellness getaway.
No doubt. And without going over our time, I always end these talks in a very similar way. Despite all the wisdom and all the advice and tips you've shared, if we had a catastrophe and everybody would forget everything that has been said on this talk, and you would have to leave one final message for people to embrace for the weekend. When you watch a movie and it keeps you have some information that just keeps playing over and over in your mind, what would be your final message? And Michaela, I'll start with you.
Oh gosh, putting me on the spot. Well, I will say what I've loved about this whole silver lining of COVID-19 is that I'm a bit of a risk taker, calculated risk taker, but I took a risk and I started doing a broadcast show by myself. We've had all kinds of mistakes, every mistake under the sun, but each one of them, instead of getting crippled by the mistake, we were okay, so we messed that up and it wasn't as perfect as one of our episodes. From that and grow from that. So I think everyone's a learning experience, and we keep growing and it keeps getting better and better. So take risks. I'm watching so many people learn Mandarin and the piano. So you're gonna have some competition, gentlemen. But just take a risk and use this time to try something. What's the worst case? You fall and you just dust yourself off and get up again. Don't get COVID.
Yeah. Or it's true. We had a panel about innovation, and somebody that is a very dear friend, James McBride, we were talking about how complicated the topic of innovation can be, and he put it very, very easy and simply, and he said, innovation is just a new idea that's implemented. That's all it is. And the secret to innovation is implementing. It's not just having the idea; it's trying it out. And as Michaela said, just taking a step forward, and if you make a mistake, you learn from it. It's better than never hitting the ball, because then you guarantee you will never make the goal, right? So I think there's definitely wisdom there. David, give us your message.
Well, Michaela's was a really good one, so I can't use that one. You know, I think the thing that I come back to is the importance of staying curious, and the really critical importance of staying forward, looking for new ideas. I always think that when a designer says this is the only idea that'll work, that's a designer that's run out of ideas. So I think staying curious and not believing you know all the answers sort of helps you find the next idea and the next idea and the idea after that.
Yes, and I know that curiosity has been a moving force in all of your story and your history, and it's good to see it's still very much alive, because we're all depending on you. You know, we're like, the answers at the end of the day is hire David. Call David.
We're good.
Yeah.
Right, Chris?
Chris, no pressure, but you can take it home.
We're good. No, listen, these are crazy times. These are insane times. So what I would say, take it day by day and hold on tight.
Absolutely. Living
Hold
in the
on tight.
present is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Hold on tight. So
I think you're right. I think there is a ride. We're in for a ride. We're in for a ride that's going to, you know, obviously already taken a little longer than we had expected. But in every ride, there is great learning and there's great opportunity for growth. And I think exactly like David mentioned, in some of the biggest crises, and we didn't get a chance to speak about, you know, most of us were in New York for 9/11 or the Spanish flu that you were talking about. If you look at, when you have the opportunity and the luxury to look back at these times, you know, when you're already ahead of it, you can see the boost of wisdom and creativity and ideas that shape our world. And they usually come in a massive wave right after these episodes. So we're living it right now. And we had the chance to make it happen right around the corner. So we want to be part of that change that's going to mold our future. So it's pretty exciting if you think about it. And so with that, I wanted to thank you so much for being part of our conversation. I value every comment, every, you know, recommendation and tip and insight into all of your wisdom. So thank you. I know that you've donated some valuable hours and some valuable time from your life, from your day, from your week. For those that are listening, thank you so much for joining us. If you are already familiar with our TL Talks or not, please feel free to subscribe and share to our YouTube channel. The idea is to get this positive energy flowing to as many people as possible. So with that, have a great weekend. Chris, David, Michaela,
thank you. You've been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really
Fun,
awesome.
all of you on
Thanks.
Inspiration Station too, each one of you.
all of us.
Thank you,
We'll be
Tina.
there.
Thanks.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. Bye, guys.
Thank you. You're beautiful.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hope to see you in New York.
Thanks.
Hey, it's amazing the subtle games that you are playing, and you don't even know I exist. You have got me on your hit list, and you're conspiring. Girl, you are sexual and bad, and now you got this on your conscience, because now I'm unresponsive.